Hello,
Well,
everyone.
okay. Please go ahead.
I'm Indo Saxena at the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers. Welcome to today's webinar on Bangladesh elections, a geopolitical analysis. We are pleased to share that American International University, Bangladesh, is the knowledge partner and co-host of this event. I'm joined with Dr. Jahidul Islam Khan, Registrar of American International University, and he is an academic visitor from the University of Reading, the United Kingdom. As you may be aware, Bangladesh has recently held its general election on January 6, in which the ruling party, Awami League, led by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, secured a landslide victory, winning 233 seats of the 300 parliamentary seats. This has enabled Sheikh Hasina to become the Prime Minister of Bangladesh for a fourth consecutive term. During the pre-election period and the post-election, there were varied reports of quotes, irregularities, and the concern on the process quotes about the fairness and safety of the election. The international community, regional organizations, and local observers closely monitored the situation and expressed their opinions on the election process. Overall, the election results have significant implications for the future of Bangladesh, for the regional security, and for the free and open Indo-Pacific. Looking at the strained relation of India and China, increasing competition of U.S. China in the region, it remains to be seen how the government will address the risks and challenges and what are the opportunities that lie ahead. Today, we will analyze the Bangladesh election through the geopolitical lens at three levels: national, regional, and international. For that, we have three eminent scholars who will walk through us with different scenarios. Please allow me to introduce our today's star panelists. We have the honor to have Brigadier General Shekhawat Hussain. He has a distinguished career in Bangladesh military and academia. He served as the former election commissioner of the country. Welcome, sir. We are pleased to have Dr. Shri Radha Datta. Dr. Datta is a professor at the Jindal Global School of International Affairs, India. Previously, she was the head of the Neighborhood Studies Center at the Vivekananda International Foundation, a prominent think tank in India, and she is a non-resident scholar at the National University of Singapore. Her newly published book is Bangladesh on a New Journey, Moving Beyond the Regional Identity. Welcome, Dr. Datta.
Yeah.
Our third star panelist is Dr. Ali Riaz. He is a distinguished professor at the Department of Politics and Government at Illinois State University and is senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, USA. We welcome you all here, and without further ado, I invite Dr. Jahid to initiate the discussion. We have just want to announce a disclaimer. The views presented here are personal, should not be constituted to any organization and any institutions. Thank you. Dr. Jahid, over to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Indo. It's deeply rewarding for me to be part of this event as a knowledge partner. And I just wanted to reiterate the disclaimer also, because none of the comments that is made here represents the position and my affiliation with the universities. It is purely academic exercise as a reader of politics and international relations. So as Dr. Indo has already alluded to in her opening remarks, a systemic view through the geopolitical lens entails looking at the national, regional, and international levels. And South Asian countries, big or small, are actually facing intense geopolitical competition affecting all three levels. Such competition is challenging their strategic autonomy, hedging, and balancing relationship with regional and the extra-regional power. From a systemic perspective, the actions and the activities at these three levels tends to suggest advancing three broad narratives, each underpinned by a discourse in the IR theories and concept. And we'll hear from our stellar experts on each of these areas, starting with Dr. Sheikh Hasina on the national level. But before I hand over to Dr. Sheikh Hasina, let me briefly set the context of the national level. Conceptually, the narrative of nationalism, sovereignty, and strategic autonomy was at the heart of the national level discourse to hold the 2024 election as per the constitutional provisions of Bangladesh. Such a narrative probably aligns more with the work of Frantz Fanon, contextualized by Shubho Basu in his recent book on Bangladesh, Intimation of a Revolution, which is written in the context of global 60s in the making of Bangladesh. The national consciousness that provoked holding the election, defying external pressure, perhaps mirror Fanon's argument that, and I quote here, "It is at the heart of the national consciousness that international consciousness grows," unquote. However, the process, participation, and the nature of political settlement of the January 7 election possibly raises three key questions. First, to what extent is the nationalistic narrative that fueled holding the election is aligned with the spirit of Bangladesh constitution and the democratic aspiration of the country? And second, will the Bangladesh case be a watershed moment encouraging the other countries in the global south to follow? What should they do or avoid doing in terms of election process and participation? And third, looking ahead, and probably most important one, what aspiration and initiatives should Bangladesh pursue to retain her strategic autonomy and hedging ability amidst the intense regional and global geopolitical challenges? Over to you, Dr. Hussain. You may take 10 minutes or 8 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayub, and thank you very much, CIRP, I think CIRP, if I'm not wrong, and AIUB, if not university, but the individual for inviting me, and inviting me in such a very important topic with very, very eminent scholars from one Bangladesh origin and another one is the neighboring country from India. And perhaps I am little acquainted with Dr. Sirada Datta, who was here during election time. I just missed meeting her. We were together in a marriage ceremony. I was told she was around with Dr. Amina Mohsin, but I couldn't meet. Very unfortunately, but I believe that I met her in Delhi, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, the first thing that I'm going to contest is that strategic autonomy. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know whether you asked me to talk about the geopolitics part of it or only the internal issues that you have talked about in the election and the constitution of Bangladesh. If I'm not wrong, you only asked me to look inward. Am I right?
Yes, sir. The first question was, to what extent the nationalistic narrative that fueled to hold the election is aligned with the spirit of Bangladesh constitution and the democratic aspiration of the country? That was
You're talking about 2014 or you're talking about all the elections?
No, the 2024, January 7th.
Okay, 2024. Yes, the first thing that I'm going to contest, maybe that is my opinion. Again, it's not, I'm also connected with one of the universities, that is North South University. I'm a fellow there in SIPG. Well, it's not their version, but it's my version. Is that when you talk about sovereign autonomy, I'm afraid that we don't have sovereign autonomy since that I may say that since our liberation, because we have not been able to maintain sovereign autonomy. And a small country like Bangladesh, which was struggling at that time, both economically and politically, with going through lots of turmoil. And then, of course, we talk about quote unquote is the parliamentary democracy. I'm afraid my very senior, my very esteemed friend Ali Riaz may throw some light on it, but as far as I'm concerned, we don't have any strategic autonomy because we are bounded by a very big power, which is aspiring to become a global power, and that I'm talking about India, which has helped liberating Bangladesh. Of course, I mean, the whole Bangladesh is indebted about it, and it's a part of history one cannot deny. But then the Bangladesh never had that kind of autonomy, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I see, and as far as I was studying. Therefore, that is one thing I think one doubt I must clear. Coming back to the Bangladesh election 2014, 2024, it's very difficult to really talk about 2024 unless I have talked about other elections, two other elections, which for Bangladesh those were no not free and fair election, if I may say so. And it's a continuation. It's not in isolation. 2014 election, it was very much interfered by our neighboring country, and it was visible. And then whatever is the result, I'm not going to go in it. And then 2018 could have been a better election because that was participatory election, so to say, but it didn't happen. And it also, now we find that there are a lot of interference otherwise. 2014, I don't think much have to be said because Madam Srirada Datta, I've read her article and her evaluation as regards to the part of election. So I don't think I have to say much. But what I can say is that this election had somehow I was just talking this evening, the whole evening with in our one of the television. This election, what it has said, I would say that this is the last nail in the coffin of parliamentary or multi-party election. One may ask, then what is going to, why did I say so? Because if you see the result, if you just go through the result, the result says there is only one party which is in the parliament, going to be in the parliament, which we're going to see in a day or two. The reason is somebody, or you may say that, well, they have 233 or 234 seats out of 300. Mind you that they have 62, so to say, quote unquote, independent, and out of that, 59 are from the ruling party independent candidate. And the party constitution says, the Article 47 says that those who would be in the election without party nomination, they would be expelled from the party. Very clear. That's the disciplinary action has been taken so far for those who have gone out of the party nomination. But this time, it is the party head who decided that, well, they can participate. And whether they would be expelled from the party or not, it's not very clear. Tomorrow, our Honorable Prime Minister is going to talk to this group. What would be their role in the parliament? Now, it's very interesting that the Honorable Prime Minister has to decide who is going to be the opposition, because the opposition, there's only one party, which is Jatiya Party, which is also leaned on the shoulder of the ruling party to get their 11 seats, unfortunately. And with that 11 seat, normally in the parliament, it cannot be called an opposition party unless they have qualified to have about 25 seats. So it's yet to be seen how this parliament comes up. But meanwhile, what has happened is that most of the parties, should I call fringe parties or parties which are older parties, they have almost vanished from the map of Bangladesh politics. If you want to name me, I can name them. I was just talking one of them, that is Rashid Khan Menon and his party. I don't know, he doesn't know what is going to be the future of his party. So is the Jatiya Party, which we thought would be the third party. Somehow they were struggling, but they could probably come up. But that party is also, as far as I'm concerned, is maybe we don't see in next election or they have already split it. Their 600 people have resigned. They're going to form another kind of party, or I don't know what will be their future. And there are so many other parties. You know the result, and they hardly would be able to recover their security deposit. So this is the scenario. What I see in future is the parliament and the parliamentary democracy and its party system. Though there are parties which are outside this game and they are known as opposition in the field, I don't know what is going to be their future course. But what I see today, the result of 2024 has, I would say in simple word, that the multi-party democracy dream is probably is being faded out in Bangladesh. Will that be a very good sequence, or will that have a consequence in the region? Yes, of course it will, because I was just talking to some of the group of our neighbor, that is India. India, they are having their election on 2024 in April, and what is happening inside India now, the political scenario. Many of them are very, very worried. Let me not name them. I think finally would know who all these people are. Many of them worried, few of them my friends who have been discussing with me that probably the model which Bangladesh has shown may not be in 100% that it will be replicated in India, but some parts, almost the spirit of this model may be taken in India as well, because there's a huge hue and cry now in India about the use of EVM, and there are allegations that the government and the election commission is not listening to the people who doesn't want to have this EVM in the elections. However, we also have elections in other South Asian countries. I think Pakistan is going to have an election. It's better that I talk less about the Pakistani election, which has been controlled so far by the powerful army. So if in Bangladesh it's not powerful army, it's powerful, I would say, our neighbors. Well, they have their problem, as Madam Radha Datta written in her article very clearly, why the neighboring countries, whom I always consider to be a source of parliamentary democracy, particularly liberal parliamentary democracy, starting from Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru till maybe a few years back, but that is also being going in the back seat. But though India has won, at least assurance of that is their constitution and the federalism, which we don't have. So the problem which I am now talking about, that does it have implication geopolitically? Yes, of course, it has implication geopolitically. We are at the crossroad of a tussle between India and China and Western China. And then we are almost also in a crossroad of what is happening in Myanmar, which is very much concerned. Bangladesh is very much concerned what is happening in Myanmar, particularly in the state of Chin and Rakhine. Every day, the things are slipping out of the authority of the Burma or the Myanmar, and we are very much connected because we are hosting about 1.1 or 1.2 million refugees known as Rohingya, who are part of Rakhine state. So therefore, as I'm getting the news from all these newspapers, secondary, of course, from Iravati and from Bangkok Post and other, that the things are not good in Rakhine state and elsewhere in Myanmar. We are very much directly affected to that. Therefore, the result of this election are bringing us in the forefront of this tussle between China, India, and China, particularly USA, then Indo-Pacific, the ideas, and so much so our relation with our neighbor India is unfortunately, I may say that the bulk of the people of this country thinking that they are deprived of a multi-party elections because of some interference from our neighboring country. I think thank you very much. And I have not touched the geopolitics part of it, but if there's a time or if there's a question, I would love to answer those. Thank you.
All right, sir. I think that thanks for that very insightful and also a little bit grim picture from the domestic perspective. We now move on to Dr.
So I'm
Sirada.
not sorry. I'm not totally pessimistic. I'm also optimistic.
Right.
That country
Right,
has progressed. There's no doubt about it in economy and
we'll come to
other
that.
places.
So we'll come to the optimistic part in the Q&A session, and hopefully we'll have some optimism from you on those grounds. But just moving on to Dr. Sirada Datta, and the perspective that we'd like to sort of entice you to engage is from a subsystemic level. The regional narrative that was predominantly advanced by India and China is arguably rooted on the discourse of stability and sovereignty norm, maintaining sovereignty norm, and does not so much emphasize on the democracy promotion. In many ways, these narratives closely mirrors the regional security complex theory espoused by the constructivist theorist Barry Buzan, and also more recently by John Mearsheimer's concept of creating a bounded regional order rooted in the realist school of Ayer Strand. Now, both this concept undergirds the regional security concerns and restricts, if not deny, the penetration of external powers within the subsystem. But the security concern in the South Asian regional security complex are discordant, not only between India and China, but also with Bangladesh. For example, as Dr. Hussain was alluding to, on the case of Rohingya, a national security concern for Bangladesh has compelled the country to approach the external actors, exposing the limits of South Asian subsystem. And more importantly, the divergent geopolitical interest of India and China, though currently very craftily managed by Bangladesh for now, cannot be assumed as perpetual. Now, these realities of the South Asian subsystem raises three important questions. First is, to what extent, if any, does the focus on stability as opposed to people's desire of a free, fair, and inclusive election hinder or impinge upon the long-term bilateral relationship of Bangladesh and India, or China as well? Second, does the Rohingya issue risk destabilizing the region, making way or in some way legitimizing a deeper penetration by extra-regional powers into the South Asia? And what would that mean for India's neighborhood first policy in general and ties with Bangladesh in particular? And third, what would be the potential indicators of a divergent geopolitical interest of India and China challenging the limits of Bangladesh's current policy of remaining neutral, contributing to a stable and stronger South Asia? Over to you, Dr. Sirada Datta. You may take 8 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's quite a wide range that you just brought out. Let me just try and address the larger question that you talked about, the regional security, Barry Buzan and Shema's theories. I think it's quite correct to say that for India, the one core priority area in the region, vis-a-vis Bangladesh, especially that we're discussing, is about political stability and security. We believe that this particular government provides exactly that. We have seen that any government which has not been a non-Awami government, we face severe security concerns and threats. So over the years, there's been a kind of a unanimity in understanding that this particular government, and we've seen how Sheikh Hasina has addressed that singularly, and and the entire robust bilateral relation actually rests on that. It's true that just because the other political party hasn't been, in the political space, does that give a free hand, or do we give a free pass? But that's reality is that that India does repose its entire interest and faith on the stability that Sheikh Hasina has brought to Bangladesh, as well as the kind of security measures that she has ensured, which are addressing India's concerns. I think China, if I look at the larger thing, I have always argued that China has the ability to work with anybody, any player, uh, across the board. And this is not only for Bangladesh, across South Asia, everywhere else. And right now it suits China because China, in fact, if I look at the last 5 years or the last term that Sheikh Hasina had, I would actually say Indo-Bangladesh, while the relationship has been strong, robust, in terms of trade and commerce, China has actually edged out. There are far more larger Chinese interests working in terms of commerce, in terms of economic bodies working within Bangladesh, which in India's case, it hasn't been so. And I'll come to details if possible later about some of the recent infrastructure development that has taken place. I'm talking about the Akhara Tripura rail line. That's mismatched. It's, meter gauge, broad gauge. Even the Chittagong the rail line that we are building, Tripura, which will give direct access to Kolkata, right now there is zero cargo space being built there. All those kind of things are there. So at some point we'll see if you tick the boxes that yes, many projects are underway. Of course, bilateral trade has been extremely robust and something which is very beneficial to Bangladesh. I think we all agree on that. But a lot of other projects in the last 5 years have been held back. We are also aware of the fact that in terms of the line, credit lines that India had offered, which is almost 8 billion, 7.8 something. It is, some statistics and figures say that is even less than 2 billion has been actually implemented. The problem, and I try to speak with my counterparts in Bangladesh, is the problem is actually from there. It's not that India is not agreeable to the project. It's just that Bangladesh has not been forthcoming. So I would just say that while we do, India champions this particular government because we believe this government is in a position to deliver with India. And the kind of relationship that we have seen from 2010, the joint communique that India and Bangladesh signed, to where we stand now, it's unprecedented. There is, a large, wide kind of a area of focus that we've had, which was never the case with India and Bangladesh. In fact, the only country who has worked across different sectors has always been China. Ever since they recognized Bangladesh in 75 in the post-Mujib phase, not only did they become the defense partner, huge amount of military hardware, but in terms of other aspects, in terms of road building, projects, everything, any big ticket project that we've seen in Bangladesh was also because of China's contribution, which was never the case with India. It is only in the recent last 20 years that we see that India, 10 years that we see India has been able to, get there. So I would actually say that this has worked well, but again, it's not everything is so positive. As I mentioned, the economic and the commerce too, and there's something that Bangladesh has so far brilliantly managed its external relationship. It's a case and study. I teach this to my students about how effectively Bangladesh has been able to manage not only China but also India, but also US and other areas, including Europe and every other region. So that's of course a different matter here. But in this particular context, where India and China obviously have some political differences, which is known. But in terms of Bangladesh and the political stability, I think they've been on the same page. And there has been much written about that as to how usually India and US, who are on the same page in South Asia, have differed on this democratic norm which you brought out. That is not a yardstick for India anymore, because as I said, we've suffered the consequences of that in the past, and I think we are not ready to walk that path again. But then again, of course, it's people for Bangladesh to choose. And I do understand what you were alluding to, that there is a perception. I think General Sakawat also mentioned about India role. I wouldn't go so far to say, I would like to believe that India has the capacity and the wherewithal. But at the same time, it's a fact that India does support. I think there, we don't mince that we do support this particular government. But of course, if people of Bangladesh decide to, bring in a far more vibrant democracy. And I think that's, I mean, way back when I started working on Bangladesh, my first book on Bangladesh, I'd called it a fragile democracy. And that fragility has only become far fragile as the years have gone by. So obviously it's up to the people of Bangladesh to ensure that the robustness is returned, because Bangladesh is known for that. It's not something unknown. On terms of the external discordant note about Rohingyas, we've seen that Bangladesh has expressed disappointment with India, with everybody else. We've seen how China has given lip service, saying that, yes, we are talking, we'll resolve it, nothing happened. India didn't even bother to give lip service. India said, okay, that's not the way we talk. We don't do aggressive postures, but we'll see what can be. But it's true, on the ground, Bangladesh has had to face the flack of that. It's also a fact that given the northeast borders that India shares with Myanmar, we've also in the recent crisis situation that both of you spoke about, that India has faced a lot of pressure in terms of the refugee population, the constant influx, and that is something that it does bother India. And the other point here is about Myanmar, India, Bangladesh is also the fact of drug and the illicit trade that continues to exist, which in fact right now when we are speaking, that's probably gone far more, because controls on the border has loosened. There's very little kind of scope of control within Myanmar just now. We are hearing, or it's a dynamic situation. Almost every day some new instance examples are coming through. So obviously it's something very difficult, and it's a challenge for both India and Bangladesh and in the entire region actually. It's not just Rohingya, that entire triangle is actually a space which I think should be of concern to not only the region but also the extra regional player. And it's very easy to, it's a vulnerable situation and anybody can kind of leverage that to their advantage. And that's something that India and Bangladesh obviously has a common concern on that. You talked about limits of neutrality in terms of Bangladesh. I would actually argue that, the way I see Bangladesh at this point of time, I think while elections have been done and we know about the perception, but we know about the cabinet formation and all of that, the critical point for Bangladesh right now is the economic crisis that they're facing. For obvious reasons, they haven't been able to turn too much of attention, but I'm sure they will be now looking at it far more deeply. And this is where India and China can come in strongly also. The problem, of course, is a lot of Bangladesh's own making because of, internal issues, and all of you know all the factors far more than I do. But at this point of time, I'm sure with kind of projects that both India is doing with Bangladesh and China is doing Bangladesh, the whole lot of loan issues, a whole lot of other agreements which are going to be signed, they will also, again, I think, try and stabilize as much as possible. Because it is obviously to their advantage that Bangladesh doesn't go down the rabbit hole, because then it obviously clearly doesn't work for either or China. So while India and China at a bilateral level have political differences, about Bangladesh, I think there's a convergence of views. And I think for all the neighbors right now, I think it's important that they try and see how, economic stability can come back to Bangladesh. We've seen how Bangladesh has been a most robust economy despite political challenges that it's faced in the last 50 years. But the last 1 year has been very critical. It's again, if it's own making, and I'm hoping that is going to be addressed with Bangladesh's very, very strong relationship that it continues to enjoy with India and China together. I'm not sure if I've addressed all the questions, but I can come back to some if I've not.
No, ma'am, you did actually brilliantly, and thank you for your very valid remarks. I was intrigued by the fact that you had your first book on fragility and, of course, democratic fragility. My PhD was on fragility 10 years back, around 11 years back from now, and Professor Riaz was one of the person that I used to turn to when I was during that time while I was working, in addition to my supervisor. But I think your remarks very conveniently lead us to invite Professor Ali. Oh, all right. I haven't read that one, though. I have actually worked with all the fragility indices in the world that exist, about state fragility indices, around 8 or 10 of them now.
Excuse me, what's that book named?
Bangladesh, a Fragile Democracy.
Okay, I'll get
Yeah,
one.
right. We'll have a
Okay.
copy of one. So I think we can now move to conveniently actually move to Professor Ali Riaz to speak about the international context spearheaded by the United States. The narrative of the United States-led Western allies appears to be underpinned by the discourse of value-based diplomacy to build an international order divided into democracies and autocracies. The primary aim was to advance their vision of a free, fair, and open Indo-Pacific that would unhinge or at least limit the regional states to roll into China's sphere of influence, including the perceived debt trap. Drawing legitimacy from the national and international instruments, the US-led Western Western narrative purports to support the people of Bangladesh and their aspiration for a free, fair, and inclusive election. The new US national instruments like the Global Magnitsky Act have been applied, sanctioning individuals and entities in Bangladesh, while the specter of similar actions have not been ruled out. Yet, such effort has not deterred the government from holding an election labeled by the United States and the others as not free or fair and participatory. Now, this contrast begs the question as to what is the wider implication of the Bangladesh case that has apparently exposed the limits of US-led Western efforts of creating an international order premised on value-based foreign policy from a geopolitical point of view. And what can the US do more to demonstrate that the seriousness of our commitment to democracy promotion? And will the repeated use of the US national instruments for global governance risk diluting its effectiveness? And finally, of course, what could be the potential trade-off, if any, that will put the 2024 election in the rear view mirror, as many are expecting, of the US-led Western allies of Bangladesh to advance their wider vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Over to you, Professor Riaz, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. And I would like to thank the organizers, CIPR, for this conversation. So let me start with the last one that you have raised, whether this could be, put to rear view mirror, especially its relationship with the Western countries. For want of a better word, we'll use Western countries just by the fact that we know that there is no one single entity as such. My understanding is that partly it is already in the rear view mirror, but partly it is not going to be in rear view mirror in coming months or possibly years, until a major shift somewhere takes place, whether within the United States or in Bangladesh. Why do I see that? Well, because this understanding and unequivocal stand. I say unequivocal stand because, look, the election took place 20 days ago. Neither the United States nor the United Kingdom has actually sent a congratulatory note. This is very unusual, isn't it? Even in case of many instances, even the authoritarian regimes who have organized fraudulent election, which everyone knew, the United States was not hesitant to say, okay, we congratulate, we'll work with you, or we would like to see that. Similar kind of statement was made under President Trump, if you recall, during the last, when there was controversial election. So this is going to remain a sore point in terms of Bangladesh's relationship with the Western countries, particularly in the United States. It would not preclude cooperation because, as the United States statement has clearly said, that they're going to work with Bangladesh. And they're not talking about Bangladesh government per se, and particularly when they're focusing on the aspirations of Bangladeshis. So some other issues have remained. Election might have gone away in the sense that it is in the past, right? But there are other issues that it has not gone away. Human rights issues, level of issues. Are those going to remain? You cannot put them in the rearview mirror, can you? So that being said, I think that this is going to continue to remain an irritant, if not anything else. So the irritant, with this irritants, do you see that they're going to not talk to each other? No. You do talk to your bad neighbor as well, right? Because you have a fence to share. Similarly, the similar interests are shared with Bangladesh. How much that would limit future cooperation, particularly in areas such as security and others, is something to be seen, because we don't know. U.S. has its own interest in pursuing security cooperation with Bangladesh. On the other hand, Bangladesh's own necessity compels them to continue despite its increasing reliance on weapon supply from China and Russia and others, right? So your third question is this, that whether, is there a potential trade-off the potential trade-off is usually we see it in the economic terms with, bluntly put it, whether there would be some quid pro quo kind of thing. That is in the general parlor, in the general communication, general conversation, right? You talk about whether there would be business interest to supersede eventually. The business interest would continue. That has continued. Bangladesh receives a large amount of foreign direct investment from the United States. To my understanding, that is, as a single country, the largest FDI comes from the United States. Will that continue? It will continue to a certain extent. Will that be impacted? We'll see. It's not going to happen in a few months. We'll have to see. So that being said, the central question that to me is important is what is the wider implication, the value-based, the foreign policy. Did it work or did it not work? First of all, given circumstances, that interest-based, foreign policy seems to be the prominent one all along. United States policy has never been values-based policy. It has. Had this been the values-based, what is the connection between the United States and India? Despite the fact this rhetoric that we are on the same page, it is not. It never been. United States have looked at India, particularly since 2000, if not since 1990, as a partner, not because they share the values. And there are serious questions in Washington and elsewhere whether India is and actually the ally they claim themselves. That it is an interest that has brought them together. And that is what clashed with Bangladesh issue. That is exactly the point. United States, if it had tried to pursue values-based, then it would have to make some sort of break from its relationship with India. There would have been some disjuncture. Similarly, as we speak, it's not only about Bangladesh. If you look at what has happened in the last 72 hours in Venezuela, what do we see? This is the same thing. After the U.S. sanctions and everything, then this took a step back to provide this space so that there's a compromise was between the ruling party, ruling government and the opposition, that there would be free and fair election. Now, suddenly, in the last 48 hours, what we have seen, the major candidate who could be a formidable challenge to the current regime has now been made ineligible for the election, right? And this has done through the court. And this is the interesting part of it. There's a pattern to it, as a matter of fact. Weaponization of judiciary we have seen in Bangladesh, we have seen elsewhere too, right? Russia is a case in point. We have seen that in Cambodia. So this is a simple autocratic playbook that you use. But it also exposes how much United States should actually go for this kind of situation. Again, let me reiterate what I said, that only to put it in rear view mirror, there are two changes. Let's say in the United States in November, if the Trump Trump wins, and my own preference, I cannot hide it. God forbid if Trump wins, the situation would change. Not only in Bangladesh, it would change globally, because that's the major issue. So the U.S. policy is, especially Biden administration, actually try to balance this one. Are they going to backtrack if Biden administration comes back to power, or even in the coming months, are they going to backtrack from that? I don't think they're going to completely reverse their course. They would find ways to pursue that one. But the way they put it at the forefront with respect to Bangladesh, and as it was at least the impression was that they're going to make a test case of in Bangladesh. That seems to have not worked as they desired. Why that didn't work? That is, that's basically even more than $1 million question. My understanding is half-hearted effort. If you go for it, go for it. If you don't go for it, you don't go for it. U.S. policymakers tend to have understood that if they keep on putting this lip services and put indirect pressure without making any use of the instruments they have in their toolbox, they would succeed. Considering that India might actually see the value of it, that resisting or at least confronting China is very much necessary. But that didn't work because you have to back it up with some certain instrument. That brings me to your other question. What are the additional instruments you mentioned, right? That there were the additional instruments. This is a very interesting situation because does United States have leverage? Yes, United States have leverage. Does UK has leverage? Now, point is that whether they're going to use the leverage. This is the dilemma they are facing, that if you use the leverage, would you lose or would you gain out of it? Leverage not used is not a leverage. Unless the leverage is used, you cannot simply call it as a leverage. Occasionally, I mean, this is the reality of international relations, right? That you have to. So, are they going to use it? They would, other additional instrument may come into play if there are two conditions that I see. Number one is the further deterioration in Bangladeshi political landscape, which I anticipate is going to happen, unfortunately, because that would put them, value-based or not, it's a mere reality of the Western countries that they will have to speak out, and speaking is not going to work, So that is number one. That is one situation that would actually. The second element that might actually push them in the users, looking for the other tools in the toolbox, is if the other considerations doesn't work out. What are the other considerations? Look, Brigadier Sheikh Hasina has brought up the Myanmar issue. I've been talking about this Myanmar issue. What happens in Myanmar is going to have an impact. And it appeared to me that in some ways the Bangladesh policy was, behind was a Myanmar issue. That whether having Bangladesh democratic mandated government, that is as a popular mandate, would give more space for the United States to look into Myanmar situation. But Myanmar situation has suddenly flared up. The rebels are now in a spree to capture cities after cities that we know of, and the regime is collapsing. So a collapse of regime in Myanmar, and it's not going to, if there is a collapse of the regime, my understanding is that Myanmar is not going to stay as a single country. It might, either it would become, at best case scenario, it would be a federal structure. Worst case scenario is splitting into 2 or 3 countries, the Myanmar Mitan. So those developments, along with other extra regional developments, Taiwan situation might actually influence whether, and now we are seeing what is happening with in the Red Sea situation and all these things. So when United States was pursuing this value base, there are other things that came at the forefront and might have delayed it. That does not necessarily mean that the values-based, foreign policy have completely failed. Whenever someone uses the word failed in international relations, I become very worried about their perspective. There's nothing called failed in international. You achieve something. You might not achieve 100%, but do you go into it to achieve 100%? No, you don't. Never ever in NIR that you can achieve 100% out of any relationship or any kind of involvement. So nevertheless, as I say, 2 elements. Instead of writing, suddenly calling it as a failed policy of the United States, I would say they have not succeeded because they didn't put complete effort. And also other considerations came into being. Having said that, this is not the end of the road. Is it being put rear view mirror? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense, can they go back to January 6th and redo something they want to? No, they cannot. It is already in the rearview mirror. But it is not in the rearview mirror because the relationship stays. Had it been in Myanmar, when there were sanctions and everything, Myanmar had an election. What happened? United States said, okay, fine. Or Cambodia, fine, good. What can we do? But Bangladesh is not in that kind of situation. So it would keep on coming, it would keep on coming in, at front and center of this relationship with the United States, largely with the United States, but mostly with other countries too. So I would stop there and say, okay, if there are any questions, I can go ahead and try to address those. Thank you again.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I think that was very thoughtful and also very detailed in some aspects. We'll come back to that, some part of it during the Q&A. And of course, we were thinking that it's not failure. We were trying to frame it as expose the limit of US-led Western effort. So it wasn't exposing the limits of the railways policy. I think,
yes, of course, there are limits to all, even the neo-realist policies. Don't they have?
That's true. Yeah, obviously.
That's why I say that in IR, whenever someone says it has failed or it has succeeded, what has succeeded? If you're looking at Afghan policy in 2001, there were drumbeat that US policy of quote unquote humanitarian intervention has succeeded. 20 years later, what are we seeing? Even 3 years later, we knew that this has, if you call it failed, you can call it failed, But that was a very new realist policy, right? It came from the neoconservative who pushed, Bush administration and others into going into it. But anyway, we can talk about those things.
All right, sir. We have around 10 minutes or more, something, and then I think Dr. Indu has a few questions.
Yes. So thank you, everyone, for your insightful remarks, and for again, very extremely thankful for giving the time on the Saturday. So I have queries for but curious what Dr. Hussain said about no sovereignty and strategic autonomy. Not sovereign and strategic autonomy. Yeah, we can understand that they're in the complex geopolitical situation. Just my curiosity is that Bangladesh is aligned not only India and China, but to the Russia as well, because in the last year Russia sent the shipment of uranium, and they are just engaged with the making the building a nuclear power plant. So when we see that, can we see it like we see in India's case that Professor Riaz discussed, not the partnership or alliance kind of that US-India and the multi-alignment or multipolarity. And then if a state is engaged in the multipolarity and multi-alignment environment, when we see that domestic situation that all of you discussed a bit, further deterioration of democracy and other things. So what are the repercussions of those things when we see that we are engaged in each and every actor in the region? And then at home, if something burst out, like a kind of thing, like what are your suggestions for the Bangladesh, like just for the Bangladesh on this?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why I said that we don't have again, I said this is my opinion, and my opinion can be challenged and probably thrown away by any time. The events that you have used. Remember that Russia and India was a very close partner in 1971. And in terms of that, Bangladesh has been very close to, of course, the closest to India, and then, of course, the Russians. And Russia today, though this is Russia, what Soviet Union has broken, but Bangladesh has almost similar relationship with Russia. We have no conflict. We never had a conflict with Russians. And as you mentioned about that, the Russians have sold to us the nuclear power plant. Remember that it's a business, and Russians are doing that business with most of the developing countries. There's hardly any other Western country would love to or like to provide that kind of a power plant without any string or without anything. But Russia has done pure business. And then there's no problem with the Russians as far as the Bangladesh foreign policy or Bangladesh relationship is concerned. As I said, it's historical till today. And if you look at it, coming back to you said about, of course, India. I'm not talking about it. It has been very exclusively told by Madam Sri Radha Dutt about their concern. I'm not putting things away from them. I'm not at all saying that they don't have concern. If I were Indian, I would have definitely a concern. But then, doing so, is India promoting Bangladesh as their friend? Or very recently, the signals that we are getting here, and we are probably the Indian policymakers are getting, that Bangladesh is also sleeping out. Bangladeshis, I'm not talking about the government. The Bangladeshis at large, and I'm sure she has come here and she knows about it. So the point which I was making, that autonomy or the sovereign autonomy or sovereignty in strategic autonomy. If in my study, if I'm not wrong, please correct. If I am wrong, please correct me. In my study, it is only India who walks on this path, and it started from Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru. Only probably changes were made in 1971 when Mrs. Indira Gandhi, as a Prime Minister, had a kind of a understanding with USSR for 25 years. And accordingly, we also had 25 years peace and friendship treaty with India in the similar line as the India had with the Russians. That's the only time I find that India has broken away from the very Nehruvian theory of strategic sovereignty and non-aligned kind of thing. So that's what I was talking about, that we are very much now, and it has been very evident and very eloquently told by Dr. Sri Radha Dutt, that we are very much Indo-centric to great extent because of our surroundings, because of our geopolitical situation with China. So far, as I very much agree with her, that so far China has shown interest in Bangladesh on economic issues, on development, as we have signed in BRI, thinking that would facilitate Bangladesh to get the Chinese help in particularly in infrastructure. And China had promised about $24 billion, out of which only I think $5 billion has been so far spent and so far released. So there are other places where the Chinese are interested in investing in developing infrastructure, like Tista Barrage, Tista water management issue, which is a point of contest between India and China. Therefore, the Bangladesh cannot decide. Bangladesh could not decide about the deep sea port. We had to make to a compromise. These are the larger sign and symptom that Bangladesh definitely lacks the strategic sovereignty in decision of making for it. In Bangladesh, I tell you that today, one of the biggest problem that Bangladesh has is the water management in the north. I don't know, there's a big talk about that Tista river is changing its course. What effect it is going to make, only the experts will be able to tell in Bangladesh. But then it's a big issue, particularly in the northern Bangladesh, that the Tista project has to come, because we are not getting, in any way, we are not getting any water from India, from the river of Tista. It's true that Tista doesn't have that much of water that which we need. Therefore, the water management is one big priority, and we don't have. Lastly, I would say, how are we dealing with Rohingya issue? We are not. We are almost on stalemate because India is not interested, and they won't like to annoy the Myanmar government, whether it is dictatorial or it is fascist or it is whatever it is. And the China, as she said, is giving a lip service because China has much bigger stake in Myanmar than Bangladesh. And if you weigh in the scale of geopolitical sort of weight, then of course the Myanmar weighs much more to India and much more to China. So we are in kind of a fix. We are really in kind of fix. We seemingly, yes, of course, so far, seemingly that Bangladesh has maintained a tightrope sort of walk, but at times it is very dangerous, because if you slip, then you really break your bones. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I wanted to say. Maybe that I have a shortcoming in understanding, but that's what is my understanding. The small little paper I've written for my university, I've written on the shifts of geopolitics in the subcontinent and how Bangladesh is placed in that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And my next question is to Dr. Datta. It's regarding India's neighborhood policy. First, how India views with this government in Bangladesh, the new government, with the same Prime Minister, as a viable strategic partner for a stronger South Asia, or India's Act East policy, and keeping the fact what is happening with the Maldives in this with India's neighborhood policy, please.
For long we believed that India's neighborhood policy was really very effective with Bangladesh. As I mentioned, from 2010 onwards, 2010 we had a different government in Delhi, it was a UPA-led government. Then 2014 we had Modi-led government, which is, just also worked on the previous agreements and made it far more strong and robust. So all this while, I would say that Bangladesh really has been the test case. I mean, it's really substantiated India's neighborhood. I've always argued in my work on South Asia is that, similar to what Professor Riaz was saying, that in IR, you can't have a static situation. You'll have wins, you'll have losses. To say that the neighborhood was a magic wand, it changed everything. No, it wasn't like that. Some things did change very well. With Nepal, we saw a very good turn. But again, there was a problem on the borders, so everything went downhill again. So, but with Bangladesh, I think steadfastly from 2010 onwards, we've held on in terms of the neighborhood. In terms of the Act East, again, India's relationship with Southeast Asia has been very, very robust from the 1991 when we launched Look East policy. That got revised into being Act East, which is all about factoring in the Northeast area. Now, whether it's the neighborhood, whether it's the Act East, and if you're looking at the Northeast, Bangladesh becomes a critical player. And this book where we talk, the new book which is now going to be out in a few days' time, this is where I'm arguing that for India, Bangladesh is a critical player in terms of actualizing much of its larger goals in the region and outside. So because of that, the fact that the kind of cross-border facilities that India and Bangladesh has built in the last few years is actually a precursor to a regional gateway, regional corridor, which will happen. We've always seen that South Asia has always been the least integrated. There are many facts about that. World Bank has fabulous reports. Even today, despite the fact that each one is doing so well economically, most of the South Asian countries, their internal, economic and commerce space is less than 6%. So clearly, the lack of integration has something which has, come in the way, been a hindrance. But the kind of, facilities, whether it's coastal waterways, whether it's road facilities, whether it's a train. So from the 1965 pre-line where, subcontinent was quite nicely had a seamless movement, we are trying to go back to that. So I believe that, politics apart, if we're going to see any regional integration take place in South Asia, it is only because of what India and Bangladesh has been able to do in terms of building transportation facilities, cross-border facilities, and essentially build economic corridor. So while there are hits and misses in the neighborhood, I am also, and I do understand the political perception about India in Bangladesh. Not only was I there recently, but I keep going. So I'm kind of aware of the pulse there in terms of the perception about India. So what Bangladeshis feel about India, what the government to government or the state to state relationship are two very different dynamics. Right now, I've argued and many times over that the state to state, the political leadership is working very well with each other. And, but at the same time, despite the fact that India issues the largest visas in the world to Bangladeshis on medical tourism and other reasons. And there's a whole lot of, interaction going on. There's a whole lot of the student fellowships have increased over the years. While all that has happened at the popular level, India is not very popular in Bangladesh. And I think water is one of the reasons, besides many other. And of course, this particular election, we've seen, that and we see a lot of these anti-India campaigns going on just now. So I'm aware of that. But I still argue for the fact that irrespective of the political dynamics and the irritants that continue to exist, India and Bangladesh have been very successfully able to build a bridge in South Asia, which wasn't there. And Bangladesh plays a critical role in bridging South Asia and Southeast Asia. So Bangladesh's political stability is important. Bangladesh's economic robustness is important to ensure that the South Asia, for the first time ever, is going to see an integration that we've never seen before.
Dr. Datta, just a sub question here. Like, if you see in the future, what is the vision of from the India side? Because you are the expert here, to give Bangladesh a larger role in the partnership while India is interacting with the Southeast Asian countries or the South Asian country. Do you see any kind of visibility of trilateral kind of thing, so that that India, like we are seeing the viable strategic partner, like it's not about the popularity. Like if you are just thinking of the one political party is there, then the popularity, the another political party comes there, so it's all gone, disappeared, like in what has happened in the Maldives case. So do you think that there is some kind of chances and the potentiality so for the trilateral, making it trilateral to build the bridges, more regional integration and more regional connectivity?
In trilateral, are you mentioning Myanmar here with
No,
Bangladesh?
no, with the Bangladesh, India, and the other partners, like other
yes.
South Asian.
Yes, so we had way behind. I think 2015 had signed Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, the quadrilateral, the motor vehicle agreement. But unfortunately, first Bhutan stepped out on environmental and other reasons. Unfortunately, again, though Nepal actually did the trial runs and Nepal stepped out again of the agreement. So we were left to India and Bangladesh. Actually, BBN becomes actualized, and one day it will. They have serious concerns about how India truckers are far more stronger in terms of the vehicle, capacity, in terms of the roads on the Indian side. So there are some issues which need to be addressed, which somehow we haven't been. Also, the problem in South Asia often is that while we build the hardware, the software doesn't, we build simultaneously, and a whole lot of software is actually required to ensure a seamless transportation movement. And I'm totally convinced that while it's been delayed, while there are other hiccups on the thing, one day we will see in Bangladesh, as I said, whether it's BBIN, whether it's India. So India is also building this trilateral highway with Thailand, Myanmar, Thailand, going to Cambodia, which I remember Prime Minister Hasina, when she was in India, she talked about how in Bangladesh would also want to be part of it. So I mean, quite clearly, and even at BIMSTEC, we're having a multimodal transport facility being built. Right now, it's kind of little webs which are being built, and a larger network will emerge. But I have absolutely no, I mean, however critical I may be of the political, policies and the kind of perception that we seem to be in denial about, it's a fact on the ground that the kind of economic integration, economic work that the two neighbors have done, which will really be a precursor to making, as I see it, Bangladesh play a far more critical role in the region and outside. I'm in no doubt about that.
Thank you. And Dr. Jahid, would you like to add something, or if you have a question, so we can wrap it up?
I think we will just let's stick to one more to Professor Riaz, maybe just a bit of curiosity because we're already closing our time. Sir, you made 2 points very clearly, the 2 conditions, and one of those which was linked to the Myanmar thing, and you said you sort of assumed that if there would be more space if there was more democracy in Bangladesh, or through the process of democracy, if there was democratic Bangladesh would allow USA more space, which undergird their sort of approach towards the region, focusing on Myanmar. What are the indications that that space is not there now or cannot be there, even although we may not have a fully democratic sort of idealistic election? This is the first point. And the second one was the reason I asked why the limits of using national instrument like Magnitsky Act for a global governance is because the Americans have been very careful in using it. I think Janet Yellen, who is the Fed Secretary, she was asked in one of the interviews that why not go on to hush with China for some of these, for applying some of these sanctions. She said it has a risk of diluting the effectiveness, particularly when you have a US dollar-based economy and moving towards certain sections of the countries towards a de-dollarization. Although in practically it doesn't look very imminent, or it will take years to arrive that kind of economic system. But do you think that Bangladesh example would encourage the global South countries and sort of create pressure on using US-based, US national governance, national instruments as a tool for global governance on human rights and sort of democracy promotion? Sir.
Dr. Khan, to respond to your last question, there won't be a general, kind of cookie cutter sort of policy towards global South. First of all, the notion of global South seems to be, in some measures, is very tenuous. How Iran and other countries can work together under the same kind of idea of global South sometimes is mind-boggling too. Do they work? Yes, they do work. I mean, there is a notion of global South. This has been reinvented to a certain extent, and in large measure by China to pursue its own interests. India has now tried to do that one. Last year, Prime Minister Modi had arranged 2 virtual summit and all sorts of things. But considering what you are saying, that whether the US policy, whether that would become a sort of a stick to use or carrot to use for others, I tend to think no, because it varies by the context and as well as the US interest in this. Even those values-based policies are not completely bereft of the interest part. To put it in a very simple manner, countries charities, so they're not going to do anything. Whether that takes priority or not is a question. Sometimes it will take priority, and then these instruments should be used. Now, going back to what you were talking about, these sanctions, why sanctions are not good. Sanctions are not good for US-China relationship, because the Chinese economy and the US economy's integration, so to speak, with Chinese, and that's not the same with Cambodia, is it? So there would be difference. Take for example, the US policy when they were talking about democracy and issues last year, US came up with the visa policy ahead of the election, as opposed to later. In most cases, US actually used that as a sanction, but in case of Bangladesh, they didn't actually sanction or use the visa as a sanction kind of thing, right? In case of Nicaragua, hundreds of people have been sanctioned and the visa was denied. But in case of Bangladesh, they did it ahead of it. Why? Because largely, given the relationship with the elite, political elite in Bangladesh and the United States, they thought this is an opening that they can actually use. Did it work? From the get-go, I was saying that the visa policy alone is not going to ensure any kind of free and fair election. That's not. Will it help? That will help. But is it going to make sure? No, it's not. So with respect to using the Magnitsky Act and these are national laws. These are absolutely national laws. But using them for a sort of global aspect is not unusual. United States has done it. Will it be done going forward? In some cases, it will be done. There is no doubt in my mind. And the final point that I would like to make with respect to how this entire democracy question, democracy and human rights question, particularly democracy and election question, so to speak, would feature would Bangladesh become a model for others? As a matter of fact, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. Bangladesh has borrowed that model somewhere else, and that is the Cambodian model that I say. This is precisely, but any model, when you take it and use it, what do? You tweak it a little bit here and there. Because in both instances and elsewhere too, a personalistic autocracy has emerged, right? And as we speak, at the beginning, Dr. Hussain has mentioned with respect to the Prime Minister is going to decide what role the independents should play. This is it is oxymoron. Independents are going to be told what to be done. First of all, if you're told to do something, you're not independent. And if you're told by the incumbent to do what not to do, that is not an independent, these are absolutely, everyone knows it. It's plain and simple. It's right in front of us. So with respect to this model thing, how that is going to impact, it is a tweaked down version of a Cambodian model that I see is being implemented.
Thank you, sir. I think we have a question from Dr. Aminul Karim. Sir, can you hear us?
I do. Thank you.
Yes,
I have
sir.
a question
Yes, please.
for Dr. C. Radha Datta. Yeah, I was listening to your neighborhood policy. That's fine, excellent. You made good integration and connectedness between Bangladesh and India. That's correct. But my question is, Bangladesh is in a deep crisis of economic vulnerability. Our reserve is going down, very steep down, absolutely. There is a huge inflation. And then reserve is, again, I said, and dollar is in crisis. We don't have much of a dollar, and there is a crisis in the bank management, economic management, market management, and so on and so forth. Now, can India rescue Bangladesh in terms of providing, say, $5, $6, $10 billion at a time, something like that, at a very subsidized interest rate? If you cannot do that, then China will fill up this void. Then how is your neighborhood policy going to, survive or sustain? Thank you.
I do appreciate what you're saying, but the issue here is that I think I did, say that very briefly, that the economic crisis that we see unfolding in Bangladesh right now is really its own making. There are external factors always, but Bangladesh has always been able to very successfully overcome the external factors. But this time, and you talked about the bank issues and the fraudulent measures that have been, basically, Bangladesh does not have a healthy financial architecture. Simple as that. There's a huge mismanagement of funds. In fact, I was just looking at some figures a few days ago. While the number of workers are the highest now of Bangladeshi workers outside the country, at the highest, in per numbers, the last quarter, the remittance has been one of the lower remittance because people are unsure of the market, right? So obviously there is a problem. And if you recall, when Sri Lanka was going through a very deep crisis and everybody else was holding out, India was very forthcoming. But even then, India doesn't have the capacity to do the kind of sums that you've referred to. If the push comes to shove, I'm absolutely confident that India will find some way to, try and support Bangladesh, but not in the big ticket way that you're suggesting. And I agree that China is probably in a space. But again, we've also heard a lot of recent reports where we also know that China's economic health is not all that great. And if you look at the same BRI promises that, Beijing did to Dhaka, not more than 5 billion has been forthcoming. Of course, the Padma Rail Bridge is happening. Whole lot of, that's not a problem within Bangladesh is that many of these projects, the big ticket projects that are happening, the actual budget is way beyond any regional international budgets. The first railways that was done. Now, of course, the railway is coming in, but the road bridge that was done, that kind of budget, which of course escalated over the years, is something that India builds, 4 such highways across the rivers. We've done that in the Northeast. So obviously the budget for any of this, the other day, I was crossing Kornafuli tunnel, which is a fabulous, technological feat, really. But somebody on your television mentioned that the monthly maintenance of that tunnel is 34 lakhs. We build huge infrastructure on 34 lakhs. Maintenance cannot be 34 lakhs, but obviously some agency been able to do that. While through the toll tax, I think right now what they were facing at this point of time, what they're receiving is some to the tune of 3 to 4 lakhs. Even if the trade and transit composition grows, because it's a very recently opened tunnel. I'm just saying there's a crazy, there is no logic to way the whole economic thing is unfolding in Bangladesh. And as I said, it's an internal problem. And if Bangladesh does not, and one was very hopeful, and I remember having a conversation with somebody in the government, Bangladeshi government, about when IMF was asked to give that support funds, about 4 billion, that IMF would help it build that financial infrastructure or that architecture which Bangladesh certainly needs. But we didn't see that happening. There's apparently another tranche coming in, I think. So Bangladesh itself has to do, some really deep retrospection has to take place, and they will have to find ways to address it. We've heard many excuses earlier that people don't have the skill sets, people are not adept at fan, but truly a lot of it is something of, being done by the crony capitalism. One small elite group has, kind of really taken Bangladesh for a lot. And the rest of the people are suffering that. And I think that has to stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
I think we are almost out of time today. It's almost 1.5 hours. And I must thank our brilliant panelists today, Dr. Hussain, Dr. Sri Radha Datta, Professor Ali Riaz, and for all the brilliant contribution. I hope we made we provided some insights to the topic, which is not that in-depthly talked about, apart from some domestic level of commentaries and discussions. I hope this will be helpful for the researchers to sort of take cue from here and then prepare some papers or insights onto the higher theories and incorporating higher theories and concept. From my side here in Dhaka, in AIB, thank you very much. Indu, over to you for the final words.
Thank you, Dr. Jaid. And I'm extremely thankful to the panelists, Dr. Hussain, Dr. Datta, and Dr. Riaz, for taking the time on Saturday. And I know that what is the time difference we are sitting here. So, for this thought-provoking session, we have more to discuss, but can't do it with this looking the time. So definitely we will have another session for that, and looking forward to many more discussions. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sri Radha Datta. And thank you, Riaz Bhai. See you next time. Thank you. And I'll look for your books.
Yes,
Definitely.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.